Okay, we have two goals in this tutorial. We want to learn how to center content with CSS, and we want to learn more about the Cascade in cascading style sheets. So I still have the site open from the last tutorial. It's 3-8. I have my index.html, services.html, and trillium.css open. So if you want to open those now. So to center content with CSS, we're just going to do this and then I'll come back and explain what happened. We are going to use an ID called wrapper. Let's create that ID in our CSS, and remember IDs start with hashtags. We're going to call this wrapper, and we're going to begin by changing the width of our content. Now later we're going to apply this to our body. So basically this is going to make everything in our page take up only 80% of the browser. Then we're going to use a property called margin left, and we'll get into margins in a later chapter, so it's not super important that you know what those are right now. Margin left auto and margin right auto. Okay, so those are the only rules we're going to have for this ID. And we're going to apply this ID to each of our pages. Now remember, I told you classes we can use multiple times, wrappers or IDs we can only use one time. We can only use it one time per page. It doesn't mean that we can't use it in multiple pages on our website, okay? Classes we can use multiple times in one page. IDs we can only use one time in a page. So let's go back to index. And in the body, we're going to add that ID as an attribute. So before that closing angle bracket, hit a space and do ID equals your quotation marks and the word wrapper. Okay, and then let's do an Alt-B and see what happens so we can take a closer look at it. Okay, so what we have here, by changing the width to 80%, it means that this is only going to take up 80% of our browser window. The body of our document is only going to take up 80% of the browser window. As we shrink that document down, it's still only taking up 80% of the browser window. No matter how close we get, see, it's only taking up 80%. The wider we get, only 80%. So the margin left and margin auto takes that remaining percent, so 20%, and it gets half of it to the left side and half of it to the right side. So 10% of your browser window will be over here, 10% of your browser window is over here, the remaining 80% is the body of your document, okay? Now that worked well and good for our index page, but if I click on services, it looks the old way. That's because I did not apply that ID. The IDs and classes only do things when we apply them within our HTML pages. So let's go to services.html, and within the body tag, we'll add that ID attribute and the keyword wrapper, okay? So now if we view in the website, both of our pages have that 80% width and then 10% white space on each side. And I'll use white space when I'm talking about content. That's a design term. Like if you ever take a graphic design class, white space doesn't necessarily mean it's white. It basically means empty space on your document. So all of this area is referred to as white space. This is referred to white space. Even like you see this right here and this right here, that is white space, okay? Now let's look at the Cascade and cascading style sheets. So if you want to look in your book on page 112, it has a larger graphic, and then you can read more about it there. But basically, you should just be aware that your CSS can be overridden, okay? So we've looked at inline, which is written as an attribute of the HTML tag. We've looked at embedded, which is written in the style section of the head of our document. We've looked at external, which is written in an entirely separate document. And you can use all of those in a website. It's not one or the other. You will have external styles, embedded styles, and maybe even inline styles. So how do you know which one's going to take precedence? Which one is going to show up? Well, when your page loads in the browser, it loads any browser defaults. So, you know, our text was always black, our background was always white, and that's a browser default. Okay, every time we loaded a page, it was like that. We can override that background by applying external styles, and then those are applied next, okay? But then let's say you had an external style that applied a black background, and then you had an embedded style that applied a red background. The red background would take precedence, okay? It would ignore the black background from the external style. It would ignore the white background from the browser default and apply the embedded. Basically, the closer you get to the HTML tag, that's the CSS rule that's going to be applied. An inline style, remember, is written in that tag of that HTML. So that's going to be the one that's applied no matter what. But then if you have an embedded, well, I'm not going to say that. So hopefully that makes more sense. Just kind of be aware of that your CSS rules can be overwritten, and kind of know this order. Basically, it goes browser, external, embedded, and inline. You'll need to know that for the test. Okay, on to the next tutorial.